Legislative Audit Commission Evaluation Subcommittee going. We'll start off with roll call. The clerk will take the roll.
Senator Dibble.
Here.
Senator Drazkowski.
Present.
Senator Rest.
Yes, here.
Representative Anderson.
Here.
Representative Lee.
Present.
Representative Quam.
Present.
That completes the roll. We do have a quorum.
Thank you, everyone. This is, like I mentioned, the Legislative Audit Commission Evaluation Subcommittee. This is the meeting of May 8th, 2026 in room G3 of the State Capitol. It's 9:06. As established, a quorum is present. I will recognize that Representative Hansen is here and invite his participation in the conversation. Are there any other non-subcommittee members present? Okay, thanks. All right, members, our task for the day is to review the background information about the preliminary topics under consideration for evaluation and select semifinalists for the legislative survey. We have Jody Munson-Rodriguez, who is the Deputy Legislative Auditor, who heads up the Program Evaluation Division with us today at the testimony table. And so I will start by inviting her to further orient us to our task and the materials that are in front of us. Ms. Munson-Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chair Dibble. For the record, my name is Jody Munson-Rodriguez. I'm the Deputy Legislative Auditor for OLA's Program Evaluation Division. And our task today is to narrow down the list of potential evaluation topics from what is now 12 to between 8 and 10. At that point, as a reminder, we will be sending out a survey to all legislators to gauge their opinions on the matters, and then we will be meeting again within the next couple of weeks to finalize our selection for the spring topics. If you'd like me to, I can walk through kind of the materials that we've put together to help you make that selection. In front of you, for those of you that have a packet, you have a white piece of paper that is just, again, a reminder of the Legislative Audit Commission's policy on program evaluation topic selection. Again, as a reminder, under number 1, we have all of the selection criteria that the Commission has adopted. You'll see that that selection criteria is mirrored on the background papers. And on the second page, under number 3, it is the requirement that the Commission select each year at least one board or committee and at least one follow-up to an OLA program evaluation. So to help you with meeting the requirements of that policy, on the next page we have on that yellow sheet, we have the topics listed under which ones would fulfill those different requirements. Right now we have 1 that would fulfill the board and committee requirement, 3 that are potential follow-up evaluations, and then the rest are just under general topics. I'll keep moving unless anyone has questions. The next piece of paper is blue. That is the proposed evaluation topics by subject. This is just to give you an idea of where there may be topics that we haven't touched or where we're spending a lot of time. As you'll note, the topics that are in italics are the ones that are either about to be released or are about to be started, so they've already been selected. The items that are not in italics are the ones that are proposed right now. So I will move on to kind of this beige piece of paper. This is the Program Evaluation Division's assessment of proposed topics. As you may recall, each year we put together background information on each of those selection criteria, and then we look across the different criteria and determine which ones we think where the Program Evaluation Division can best add value. You'll note that we have 4 right now that we think are currently promising. We did not rank those. Those are simply in alphabetical order. Same with those that we think could be promising for a later date. If you had a chance to look at the background information, you'll see that we think all 4 of those have meet the criteria for being a good evaluation, but they have different timing issues that may suggest that we want to wait until fall to think about selecting them. So for example, for the Minnesota Paid Leave Program, since it is so new, it would be really important to get at least a year of data. We would suggest not starting that one until probably late spring of 2027. So you may want to think about, if you're interested in selecting some of these, maybe pushing it off for fall. Then we have a couple of them that we ranked as, I guess, less promising. Those are ones that we think could be feasible, but potentially have less chance for us to have an impact with any recommendations we may come up with. You might be familiar with the Minnesota Research Tax Credit evaluation. We did that one back in 2017. This would be a potential follow-up. We found a couple of issues in that report that we think would actually still be issues if we were to redo this evaluation, that we think could just limit the impact that we would be able to have with our recommendations there, including data, lack of data availability, and then just a lack of clear goals for the program. For the Office of Attorney General Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, that one, again, we could definitely do some work in there to provide some information, but because it is a heavily federally controlled unit, also it receives federal oversight, we just were unsure whether we would have the same level of impact in doing an evaluation of that one that we could in some of the other proposed topics. And then I'll bring you down to what we consider to be potentially the least promising for where OLA could provide value to the legislature. The first one is in corporate concentration. As we note in the background paper for that one, because it's not a program, it's really a giant study that may be more suited to an academic institution. We were unsure whether we would be able to really meet our mandate of being able to recommend improvements to a program or an agency. And then under DHS system modernization, we have ranked that as least promising also because that really seems to be a place where our IT audit division would have more impact. We think that that is one that would be better taken off the program evaluation list and placed for potential selection in 2027 by our IT audit division. So our last piece of information then is just the background papers. Excuse me. I'd be happy to go through them or just answer questions in the kind of keeping our eye on the clock. I know everybody has some limited time here.
Ms. Munson-Rodriguez, could you just give us a quick flyover of the background papers?
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. I'll just kind of go in the order that you have them in front of you. The Board of Behavioral Health and Therapy, that is one that OLA has not looked at. It has an important function in licensing health professionals in Minnesota, and we have heard some concerns that there is a lack of sufficient mental health professionals in Minnesota. So this is one where we think that we could have a good impact. It's a feasible evaluation. And I'll note that it would meet the requirement to study a board or commission. The next one is corporate concentration in Minnesota. As I noted previously, if you look at the evaluation questions here, they're extremely broad. We struggled as a division to find places where we think that we would add value, given the nature of the work that we typically do in looking at programs and determining whether they're working effectively. So if this one were to be selected, I think we would really need to narrow in on maybe one of the many proposed questions and have a good conversation with the legislature about how we could be useful. The next one is DHS Adult Day Services Licensing. Again, this is one where it seemed that a lot of the information meets the criteria. There's a high impact for individuals who use these services on a daily basis, a high feasibility for us. The issue with this one is really more of a balance issue. We have not evaluated adult services, but we are about to start an evaluation of DHS OIG's investigations. Licensing is also within OIG. They're not exactly the same divisions, but it's just a potential for some overlap there that may be difficult for that agency to handle. We might need to stagger this one. The next one is DHS County Service Approvals and Provision. This is one where this is one where we would be looking for a little bit of direction from the
Sorry.
Audit Subcommittee.
I'm sorry, I didn't see. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll let the auditor finish first, and then I'll ask my follow-up
All right,
question.
great, thanks. Go ahead.
So the county service approvals and provision, this as it is currently posed is, I'm going to say gigantic. It would take our entire division probably a couple of years to look across all of DHS's programs. So really what we would need to do is select a program within DHS where then we could drill down and focus on how the approvals and provision of that happens between DHS and counties and use that as a bit of a case study. So we think that if we're to select a specific program and narrow it that way, it is a feasible and a useful evaluation. I think that we frequently receive questions and concerns about the provision of services, the harmony between DHS and counties. So if this is one that you're interested in, if you have further direction for us, we would definitely welcome that.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think to this point, should this move forward, what is the process for us in narrowing down on a specific program within this or whatnot? Is that you just scoping with members and then doing a quick survey, or are we going to meet as an audit commission again to say, hey, since this is one of the topic, these are the list of programs that could potentially be evaluated? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Auditor Munson Rodriguez.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Representative Lee. We can really do it in the way that is best for the Legislative Audit Commission. If the Audit Subcommittee has kind of concerns about a specific program, we can tailor that information for the survey so that, legislative members know what we're thinking we're going to be focusing on and aren't maybe surprised when it comes out with a specific focus. So that is something that we can do here. We can also leave it broad and then work with you all at the kind of when we ratify it to focus in. It's also something that we could just simply select it. And then as the team moves forward, we go through our typical process of scoping. And then we kind of narrow in at that time on what would be the best place. One thing I would note is that it is always nice to have a little bit more direction when we send surveys out, just so that legislators have a better idea of what they're voting for. But it does not need to happen right here, right now.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that, Auditor. Maybe a recommendation then, if this is to be moved forward today for the legislative survey, would it be possible for you guys to send an addendum of potential follow-up projects within this area that we could take a look at so that members know should this move forward and was selected in a later date? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Lee, you mean when you say addendum or follow-up to the commission or to the entire legislature?
Mr. Chair, I think, let's say that we move forward today and this is part of the 10 topics or so. I think it'll be good to have an addendum when we do the survey, whenever this is, I think, the next week or two, just a follow-up so that we have that, should we connect with our members to look at, picking topics or whatnot, that they know that there are potentials, subcategories of programs within this particular topic for them to take a look at.
So I'm not 100% clear, sorry. Would that be like something in writing that would be conveyed to the whole legislature or to audit commission members to engage with their colleagues on?
Thank you for the follow-up. I would say to the entire legislature, just more of, if, to that point, I don't know how many programs there are within this topic, but if there's, let's say, 5 or 10 that are potentials for us to look at, I think as a member that's not on this committee, I would appreciate knowing that, okay, of this big all-encompassing topic. There's 5 or 10 that's worthwhile for us to take a look at, and so just providing some directions for members when they are evaluating which one they want to rank.
All right. Ms. Munson Rodriguez, do you have a response to that idea?
Sure. Thank you, Chair Dibble, and thank you, Representative Lee. We could certainly, I think that we can look back at the full list and see if there are specific programs that were already on the list. We can also certainly look at the information that we already hold in places where we think that, this type of review might be really beneficial. And we can add to the background paper, I would maybe say 3 or 4 suggestions, since we will be trying to narrow down to one, if that is where the commission would like us to go with this.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, we can talk a little bit more about that maybe as we get into the topic selection back and forth. Okay, moving on. So Department of Human Services Systems Modernization.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So DHS system modernization, as I noted, really the crux of this is going to be better served in an IT audit. So I would suggest removing this from the program evaluation list and moving it over to a potential IT audit for consideration in 2027. The next one is the MDH Mortuary Science Program. This one, it's a good candidate. It has high state control, high feasibility. We think that it could be a really good evaluation. Unfortunately, right now, there are some balance issues. This is controlled by the same regulatory division as assisted living and nursing home. And we are currently completing an assisted living licensing evaluation. We are about to beginning a nursing home licensing division. And so this is another one where we might just want to consider this at a later date because of the timing issues and the strain that it might put on that one division within MDH. Minnesota paid leave. As I noted, this is a high impact program. It is, there's a lot of interest in it. We believe that it would be feasible. The issue with this one is timing because it is so new. We would recommend waiting to consider this one to start at a later date so that we have at least a year of information that we can work with in conducting the evaluation. Next is MPCA feedlot permitting. This is another potential follow-up evaluation. We have not looked at this type of permitting since 1999, so it has been a long time. We think it's definitely something where while the state resources devoted to it are low, it does have a fairly high impact in the communities where these feedlots are located. We think that we could feasibly do this as long as we select a sample of spaces to look into. So this is, I think that this could be a good, doable project.
We have a
Yes.
question, Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Director. I was looking at the original evaluation question and then the revised question, and often in these discussions, we're looking at time as the measurement of success, how quickly things are done. And I would maybe just offer that we should look at, is it working? Is it effective rather than how fast can we get the permit out? And I think because this hasn't been looked at since 1999, there would be a lot of data on, even how many feedlots were permitted in 1999 versus now. What's the attrition rate? What's the expansion rate? What's the water quality impact or the human? There's some recent data that's coming out about increased human health impacts near feedlots that might be strong scientific evidence. And then finally, permitting is always on how to get something going. It's like the speed is always focused on, but we never talk about closure or the end. And so everything has an end. And so does permitting effectively consider closure of a feedlot, let's say when the owner dies or if there's an emergency or or just time, and they get out of the business, and what happens to that feedlot. So I would ask, Mr. Chair and members, if some of those questions could be included in, I think it's a very worthy topic, but rather than just looking solely at how fast do we get permits out, might be useful for the legislature next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have a response, Ms. Munson Rodriguez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Hansen. Yes, absolutely. As you'll notice under the revised questions, once we took a look at the questions that had been posed to us, they were similar to the ones that we had looked at back in 1999, but in order to kind of consider it a follow-up, we did want to add something about how well they're monitoring environmental effects of feedlots. We can certainly add something else about, looking at attrition, water quality. We can add some more questions in there, but I would note that a lot of the water quality, those effects would be within that third question.
Thank you. All right, moving on.
Moving on to Minnesota Research Tax Credit. This is another potential follow-up evaluation. As I noted, this is one where we identified some concerns back in 2017 when we did this review, particularly that there were not clear goals for the program. We had some limited data. As far as we can tell, those issues still remain. And so we have some concerns about how well we could provide actionable or useful recommendations if we were to conduct this evaluation as a follow-up at this time.
Senator Rest.
Back in 2017, we had been working with one of those think tanks. What was it? Pew or something? And we put in legislation to require a tax expenditure or something like that to be, one had to be picked, and it was a disaster. I mean, the information wasn't available. I'm sorry, but the OLA's office is not equipped without having to go directly over to the Department of Revenue and now perhaps even the LBO. And last year, our 23, we just made it refundable. And so there's not very much history of it being refundable. And with tax statutes, we don't put, or at least the Senate doesn't, we don't put purpose statements in them. The language of the law speaks for itself. And I hope we would not get in, I don't know if it was, proposed by someone who just objects to, and it's actually reversed. It is research and development credit. It's the R&D credit that is used in the tax committee, at least. Maybe I don't know if the formal term for it is research credit, but the better ask is of the research department of the Department of Revenue, which is also itself neutral with regard to political bias. The research department doesn't talk to the people who come over here and lobby us from the department, for example. There is a wall between the research department and the Commissioner of Revenue, for example. So I hope we don't choose that one.
Ms. Munson. If I could ask a question. Ms. Munson Rodriguez, is there a mechanism by which this commission or the OLA could look to, like the research department at Department of Revenue, to undertake a research project of this nature that might not be best within the purview of the OLA? It's similar to a conversation, a sidebar conversation you and I had prior to the meeting earlier today, where another agency might be better equipped to handle examining an idea that has been brought to our attention.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your comments, Senator Rust. I believe that would be the purview of the legislature. We would certainly stand ready to answer questions if there were another entity that were undertake a study in which we have some experience. But, I believe that would be something that would be for the legislature to indicate, to direct another entity to do. The other thing I would note is that this may be better suited for LBO now has a tax expenditure research section. Not trying to put work on their plate, but this seems really up their alley. So this may be a place where the legislature would want to consider directing that unit to look into this rather than OLA.
Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Also, it was such a frustrating experience that the very next year, we removed that requirement for having a tax-related one because it just was not well-suited. Every 2 years, the Department of Revenue publishes a tax expenditure budget, but actually it's a report. And even the LBO, when it's making its recommendations or studies, finds itself, even though it had hired another economist, finds itself having to go to the research department of the Department of Revenue to get accurate information. So I just think we thought it was a good idea when we were working with a few people, and it just ended up not being well-suited. And I think also it's tax expenditures are frequently changed. They're not long-term programs that are not, or they're seldom subjected to a change. They change all the time. They change because the provisions are scalable. And depending on whether you want to give tax relief or you want to raise taxes, that's where the legislature in any given year can make those changes. So just skeptical of going that route, Mr. Chairman.
So just to follow up to this. So returning to my thought was maybe the commission, when we're in full commission,
Sure.
could send a nice letter or a strongly worded letter to the Department of Revenue to perhaps look into this idea. And I have another one that I'll talk with you about later. All right, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for this discussion. And just looking at the background information, looking at the impact, and you guys have here that we estimated in 2017 that the credit increased jobs and earning annually from 2008 to 2014, but did not pay for itself. And so for me, the question, maybe not for a program evaluation, but is it appropriate, Mr. Chair, for the financial division of the auditor's office to look at this? It's quite concerning that, we're paying into a program that's not paying for itself. And so it seems like we don't have this information, and when you have to estimate if, this is a benefit for the state or not, it seems like, we don't have that information. And so can we actually do a financial audit on this just to get this information if we are paying for this or not?
Deputy Auditor Munson Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Lee. In order to come to that conclusion, we did a pretty involved econometrics analysis, which is outside the scope of the typical work of our financial audit division. If there were a division within OLA that would do this type of research, I would say it is the Program Evaluation Division. But as Senator Rust said, we do have to kind of rely on expertise that we can bring into house to sometimes, get information about those tax expenditures and work on that type of thing. So I think that it would not be necessarily appropriate for the Financial Audit Division.
Great, thank you. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to support your letter to the Department of Revenue to really look into this to see if this is worthwhile for our taxpayer. Thank you.
Great. Put it on the full commission agenda. All right. Moving on, Office of Cannabis Management.
Okay, so Office of Cannabis Management, this is another one that we think could make a good evaluation. We have heard some concerns kind of across the board on licensing, on other activities within this office. But again, it is a relatively new office. It did just start licensing products for sale in less than a year ago. So it may be prudent to wait until a later date, perhaps fall, to consider this one in order to have enough data for us to really dig into the issues. But again, this is one where we think that it would be a good evaluation based on your selection criteria. It might be better to hold off. Moving on to Attorney General Mafuku. This is one, as I noted, where there's a high impact, there's a lot of interest. This is a unit, however, that is required by the federal government. It gets standards that are set by the federal government, and it is audited by the federal OIG. And so this is a place where we felt like we had less opportunity to provide new information or actionable information for the legislature. And then last, I would just note, yes.
All right, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to this point, one of the discussion points, you said that it is being evaluated by the federal government. I'm curious, do you know when was the last evaluation of this, and is it publicly available that maybe can be distributed to members of the commission and the legislature should this not be picked? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Munson Rodriguez.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. The last review of the federal OIG was published in 2023. I believe it was for the year 2022. I can certainly send that link to your office if you would like.
Thank you. What did you call this? Fuku?
Oh, sorry, Mafuku,
Mafuku.
the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit,
All right.
the alphabet soup that is government. And then moving on to the last one, post-secondary enrollment options. This is another potential follow-up evaluation. Again, we have not been there in many years. This one, I believe, was back in 1996, the last time that we looked at this program. We have heard a number of concerns, both on the side of the cost of the program and about the availability throughout the state. We think this is suited to the type of work that we typically do, that we could add some value in terms of looking into what different school districts are doing. The only caution I would have is, as with any time we're looking into education programs, we would have to look at a sample of districts and schools and what MDE itself is doing.
All right, thank you. And then I thought I would mention an idea that came to us in a discussion that Senator Rest and I had with one of our colleagues about the potential for statewide school employee healthcare system. I have two thoughts. One is it would be a fairly large analysis, kind of an actuarial study of the feasibility of an idea that doesn't quite exist yet. We have the PEEP, of course, which is a voluntary opt-in that can come about through the negotiation process on a district by district basis. But this would be something more robust and substantial and be just a kind of a mandatory enrollment in that statewide plan. So either, my idea, Senator Rest, we haven't talked about this yet, is either we kind of acknowledge that idea and have more discussion about it in the autumn round and maybe, through a somewhat informal or formal process, ask the evaluation division to do the potential follow-up evaluation examination like this. Or we write a nice letter to MMB, who is probably more well situated to taking on an analysis of this nature. Ms. Munson Rodriguez, or Senator Rest, did you have a response to that?
I would prefer that we consider it as a topic ourselves, rather than sending a letter to MMB. I don't mean to be pejorative, but I feel more confident sending a letter to the Department of Revenue and getting a result than I do sending one to MMB and getting a result. Just an observation, not a complaint.
Ms. Munson Rodriguez, any thoughts about this walk-on idea, as it were?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Rest. We can definitely add it to the list for consideration in fall. If you'd like us to develop a background paper for fall consideration, we can also do that. The other thing that I would note is that I hope I don't get myself in trouble by saying this, but there have been other times when we have taken a look at actuarial work that other offices have done. And so if that is another route that the commission would like to pursue, to potentially ask MMB to do something, an actuarial exam of this type of work, when that has happened in the past, we have kind of provided an independent opinion on the methodology that was used there, just to provide another source of information.
Senator Rest.
Thank you. We also have, as I recall, in that conversation we had with the other member, a description of the things that would be part of a survey or an analysis or some like that. And I think it would be helpful to share that with the OLA to see what they make of it as well.
Yeah, I lost that piece of paper and asked for another copy
Oh,
this
okay.
morning and haven't seen it yet, so.
Okay. We can provide that to you, and it was actually, a suggestion for legislation, but it hadn't been as thoroughly vetted. Just all the features that would go in it that would make it a meaningful report. And so proposing it to as an amendment to legislation seemed premature, even though people have been interested in it for years. So I would think sharing that information and then it's getting an evaluation from the program evaluation division, I think would be
Very good.
helpful.
I'll just mention parenthetically, this, it's not a new idea. In fact, it was passed by the legislature at one time and advanced to the governor's desk where it was vetoed. So this actuarial analysis was done at one time. It might be just an update to that. It might be easier than we think. All right, so now we are open for discussion, and the first hand I see is Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wanting to chime in on this discussion. So I'm not completely clear with what you and Senator Rest were talking about, but it sounds like some sort of study of what could be, or this sounds like it's not in the purview of what the OLA does. OLA evaluates existing programs rather than speculative ones and developing research around legislation. So I'm kind of, at least that's kind of what I heard. Can you provide some clarity?
Nope, you're exactly right. Yep. Thank you. You make a good point. So yeah, we'll take that under advisement as the conversation ensues. But no, you're accurate, Senator Drazkowski. All right, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. How many of these are we picking?
So, yeah, that's a good question. Ms. Munson Rodriguez, how many do we typically advance to the full legislature for the ballot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We're looking to advance 8 to 10.
Did you hear that, Representative Anderson? 8 to 10.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. So, I mean, it seems pretty logical to me that at a minimum we take off the two on the bottom that seem like they're not really doable, and then we're left with 10. So,
Representative Anderson is always the
Very
most efficient member here you have.
and we're done.
So, Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do support Representative Anderson if that is going to be a motion. But just going back to the the Attorney General's office, the Infuku one, if we were to select this one, what calendar year data will you be looking at, knowing that the federal government looked at 2022? If this was selected for this year, would you be looking at 23, 24, or just trying to figure out, chronologically, is it going to be impactful since we already have that? And then the second piece of that question is, do we know when the federal government will be looking at this unit again? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Deputy Auditor.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Thank you for the question, Representative Lee. I am not sure whether they're on a 3 or 4 year schedule, so I would have to check in to see when the federal OIG would be going back there. As for when OLA would be doing its analysis, the soonest that we could start this evaluation would be, I would say, August of this year. So I think that the most recent data we would be looking at would be fiscal year 25. But I think that there's some flexibility there, dependent on what other topics we receive here, whether it would be better to start them earlier if OIG is going to Mufuku in the next several months. We could have conversations about the timing of that, but I would say the most recent we'd be able to get would be fiscal 25.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
For 26.
maybe this will be just my last comment before we vote on anything else. I think my proposal will be, supporting what Representative Anderson said, doing the 10, or if we wanted to go down then 10, then I think this is one that might be a little bit redundant, that we could cut this one and go down to 9 if we want to do less than 10. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, a formal motion has not yet been made, I'm sorry. Senator Drazkowski still has his hand up, so sorry, Senator Drazkowski, if we jumped past you prematurely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was my other hand. So I just had a thought on Mafuku, and I'm still trying to make my tongue work with that new term. But I'm wondering, Ms. Munson Rodriguez, if you could, if a potential evaluation around this topic could be one that brings to the foresight of the legislature the federal OIG's work, and then your team would maybe fill in around it with other things that they don't do that gives us a more robust picture, not only maybe a lesser amount of work from your end, but one that fills in the gaps and then also brings the federal OIG report in front of us.
Deputy Auditor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Senator Drazkowski. I would say typically when we're looking into any program that has a fair amount of federal control, that's absolutely what we would want to do. First, we'd want to look at where there are spaces that state has control, and so that we could potentially make changes and can make recommendations. So those are spaces that we might want to kind of dive into. Also, any spaces that aren't covered by a federal investigation. Oftentimes we're looking at programs, for example, at DHS that are getting regular kind of federal oversight that happens at the Department of Education. And so this isn't something we're a stranger to. It's just something we're pointing out that it does have some eyes on it already. But yes, we would definitely, if this were selected, we would look for places where we could add value that isn't already available.
Thank you. Senator Drazkowski.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Munson Rodriguez. I'd advocate for that, one that fills in the areas that we can add the value and not do duplication what the federal IG is doing.
Great, thanks. Senator Rest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Representative Anderson's choosing the top ones, but I certainly will vote against doing the, putting a ballot out on the Minnesota R&D credit at this point. So if it's going to be 9, that's the one I would take out. And so I would move that we do the 4 that are currently promising for a later date, and then I'm indifferent to, I'm opposed to the research credit, R&D credit study, and would follow the will of the group here on any of the others, including ones that maybe even aren't on this list. That's my motion, if that makes sense.
So Senator Rest moves the first 8 and is indifferent to the following 4. I don't know if that's a motion, part of the motion.
I'll just move the top 8.
Okay, so Senator Rest moves the top 8. That doesn't mean we can't have a later motion if we want to include anything else. So all in favor, oh, I'm sorry, Senator Representative Anderson, before we take a vote.
That if we added the Medicaid fraud control unit as the 9th, then I think we're done. So, I mean, I would, but I'll wait if you want a motion later.
Senator Rest, would you respond to that as a friendly amendment to your motion?
Yeah, so the first 8 and then the Office of the Attorney General Medicaid Fraud Control Unit.
All right. Any discussion on that motion? Representative Lee.
Mr. Chair, you know, knowing that we have 4 in the currently promising, 4 in the promising for a later date, I would support the initial motion for that. And I believe we should have more discussion for the remaining 4. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. So procedurally.
I'll restate my motion.
All right. Senator Rest.
I move the top 8.
Okay. So the friendliness of the motion of the Anderson motion has become unfriendly. So now we just have the top 8 as the rest motion. And I have Representative Quam who would like to weigh in. Representative Quam.
Well, we can either go ahead and do the vote on the top 8. I would agree with Representative Anderson on the friendly one where she added a 9th one.
Very good. So we'll take up the Anderson motion as a separate motion. So why don't we go ahead and vote on the top 8 now? Anything further on that discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say no. Motion carries. Representative Anderson will return to you.
Thank you. I move that we add the Office of the Attorney General Fraud Control Unit as the 9th, understanding that we're going to start from, the federal audit and work from there, whatever makes sense for the auditor.
Very good. Discussion to the Anderson, discussion to the Anderson motion. Representative Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think, I already kind of stated my position, with regards to the conversation that we've been having with the auditor's office, saying that, there are some federal oversight already. And, there was one that was just done recently. And so as we look through this, not just for the Infuku, but, I think Chair Russ is concerned with the research tax credit. I understand that. And so fully support not moving that forward. And then the 2 least promising seems to be research or IT. And so I think that, we have our top 8 and we should keep that. And I just don't want to be redundant with the Infuku one. So I will hope members not support the motion for picking Infuku as number 9. Thank you.
Very good. Anything further, members? All right, all in favor of the Anderson motion to add Office of the Attorney General Medicaid Fraud Control Unit with the understandings that have come through the conversation. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. No.
No, no.
All right. Can we, the chair is in doubt. Can we do a show of hands? So all in favor, show your hands. Is that possible in the,
Mr. Chairman, I think we should be a roll call,
All right.
easier.
can we go back and do a roll call? All right. Is it all right with members if we just roll call it?
Yep.
Hearing no objection. All right, the clerk will take the roll.
As to Representative Anderson's motion, Senator Dibble,
No.
Senator Drazkowski,
Aye.
Senator Rest,
No,
Representative Anderson,
Yes.
Representative Lee,
Lee, no.
Representative Quam.
Yes.
There are 3 in favor and 3 against.
On a tie vote, the motion does not prevail.
Okay.
All right. But that doesn't mean we can't go back and talk about it this fall. Representative Anderson doesn't
No, it's
disappear
fine.
in the
It's all
thin
good.
air.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I'll just,
Mr. Chair?
Senator Representative Quam?
Yes, I had raised my hand before the, right after Lee spoke, before we got into the voting. My thoughts are, because there is some interest in this, and because there is a federal report, that we, as a group in the OLA, could look at the the federal report and how we may be able to augment or clarify or improve, and that we can always look at that at a later date, since we're doing, splitting up across different times of the year. I just think that we already have some auditing, of course, of the constitutional offices, and it might be interesting, this different look or twist to that in that office.
So Representative Quam, would you maybe are we asking the Legislative Auditor Program Evaluation Division to kind of do a second kind of a revised topic selection background information sheet from that perspective?
I think that would be appropriate, since there's a fair amount of interest, and we really don't know exactly what the feds are doing and might not be doing that would be of interest. So that would be something I would like.
Thank you. Deputy Auditor Munson Rodriguez, do you have a response to that suggestion? Just to do a revised sheet for us to look at this fall.
Yes, thank you, Chair Dibble. Yeah, we can definitely, if you would like us to take a look at revising this for the fall for consideration, we can see if we can narrow the scope.
All right, thank you. And then could we just do kind of a write-up evaluation of the statewide school employee insurance idea, just for discussion purposes at our fall meeting? Thank you, and I'll get
Yes,
that.
thank you.
I'll get that draft legislation to you as well.
Yeah.
Representative Lee.
Thank you, Chair Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think just to echo Representative Quam and for just oversight, if we could be more specific and kind of getting to Senator Drazkowski's point, Auditor, if you guys could be more specific in your new background information of what will be the language or the questions you will be evaluating as we move forward. I think that will be helpful as we evaluate whether we move this forward. And so if you more specific, just how it will be different from the federal government. Thank you.
And members, maybe reach out to Ms. Munson Rodriguez between now and then to have a conversation to convey some more thoughts about what that topic selection background information sheet might look like this fall. All right. Anything further, members? All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.